Governor Sarana stood at the window of her office and watched the sky burn. The Draxar fleet had arrived 3 hours ago. 40 warships now hung in orbit above her world, like metal birds waiting to feast on the dead. Their dark hulls blocked out the stars. Their weapons pointed down at cities full of innocent people. Cathara Prime was a peaceful world. The Valeth people who lived here had given up war centuries ago. They believed in trade and friendship and solving problems with words instead of weapons. Their ships carried grain and medicine and passengers. They had no guns. They had no missiles. They had nothing that could fight back against the monsters in their sky. Sarana was old. She had led her people for 40 years. She had seen droughts and plagues and economic troubles. She had guided her world through every crisis with wisdom and patience. But she had never seen anything like this. She had never faced an enemy who wanted to destroy everything she loved simply because they could. Her assistant, a young Valeth named Torek, entered the room. His skin was pale with fear. His hands were shaking. "Governor," he said, "the Draxar commander is broadcasting again." Sarana nodded slowly. "Show me." The screen on her wall flickered to life. The face of Warlord Thesok filled the display. He was a Draxar, tall and broad, with gray skin like stone and eyes like burning coals. Scars covered his face. Each one was a trophy from a different conquest. He smiled as he spoke, and his teeth were sharp like knives. "People of Cathara Prime," Thesok said, "I give you 3 cycles to surrender. Open your cities. Lay down any weapons you might have. Prepare yourselves for service to the hegemony." He paused and his smile grew wider. "If you do not surrender, I will begin with your capital city. I will burn it from orbit. Then I will move to the next city and the next until nothing remains but ash and obedient slaves." The broadcast ended. The screen went dark. Torek was crying. "What do we do?" he asked. "Governor, what can we possibly do?" Sarana did not answer immediately. She turned back to the window and looked up at the ships that would kill her people. She thought about her children and grandchildren hiding in shelters beneath the ground. She thought about the farmers in the fields who had no idea that death was coming. She thought about all the lives that would end because the Valeth had chosen peace over war. "We ask for help," she finally said. She sat down at her communication console and began recording messages. She sent them to every species she knew. She sent them to the Ordani republics, who had traded with the Valeth for generations. She sent them to the Thessian merchant lords who called themselves friends. She sent them to the Galactic Council, whose purpose was to maintain peace among the stars. She sent them to species she had barely spoken to, species she had only heard of in passing. She told them all the same thing. The Draxar were here. They would kill everyone. Please help. Please send ships. Please do something. Then she waited. The responses came slowly over the next several hours. Each one broke her heart a little more. The Ordani republics expressed their deep concern. They condemned the Draxar aggression in the strongest possible terms, but they could not spare any ships. Their own borders needed protection. They wished the Valeth the best of luck. The Thessian merchant lords offered their thoughts and prayers. They suggested that the Valeth try to negotiate. Perhaps they could offer the Draxar something valuable in exchange for mercy. They did not mention what the Valeth could possibly offer to creatures who only valued conquest. The Galactic Council scheduled an emergency session to discuss the situation. The session would take place in 3 weeks. Everyone knew the Draxar would be finished long before then. Other species did not respond at all. Sarana read each message with growing despair. Her people had spent centuries building friendships across the galaxy. They had shared their food and their medicine and their knowledge freely. They had helped other worlds in times of crisis. They had believed that kindness would be returned with kindness. Now when they needed help the most, they were alone. Torek brought her a cup of warm tea. She did not drink it. She just held it in her hands and felt its warmth fade slowly, like hope. "There is one more message," Torek said quietly. It went out automatically to all registered contacts, including a species called humans. Sarana looked up. Humans. A young species from the far arm of the galaxy. You met their trade delegation a few years ago. Sarana remembered. Small creatures, not very different from her own people in appearance. They had been polite and curious. They had asked many questions about Valith culture and history. They had seemed friendly but unremarkable. Their territory was small. Their fleet was limited. They were nobody important. They cannot help us, Sirana said. They are too far away, too small, too weak. I know, Torek agreed, but the message went out. I thought you should know. Sirana nodded and turned back to the window. The Draxar ships had not moved. They did not need to move. They could wait. They had all the time in the world. Her people did not. The first day passed in terror. Families gathered in their homes and held each other close. Parents told their children that everything would be fine, but their voices shook with lies. The shelters filled with people carrying whatever they could grab. Photographs, treasured possessions, memories of better times. The Draxar did not attack yet. Warlord Thesok was patient. He wanted the Valith to feel their fear. He wanted them to understand how helpless they were. He wanted their surrender to be complete. On the second day, Thesok grew bored. Destroy the orbital cargo stations, he ordered his fleet. All of them. The stations were empty of people. Sirana had evacuated them as soon as the Draxar arrived. But they were full of food, an entire year's harvest waiting to be exported to other worlds. Grain that would have fed billions. Medicine that would have healed the sick. Resources that represented the hard work of every farmer on Cathara Prime. The Draxar ships fired. The stations exploded one by one, their contents scattering into the void. Thesok recorded the destruction and broadcast it to the planet below. This is what happens when you make me wait, he said, still smiling. Tomorrow, I will do the same to your cities, unless you surrender now. Sirana watched the footage in silence. Around her, her aides wept openly. Some screamed in rage at the screen. Others fell to their knees in despair. She understood what Thesok was doing. He was not just destroying resources, he was destroying hope. He was showing the Violeth that resistance was pointless, that their lives meant nothing to him, that he could take everything they had whenever he wished. It was working. She could see it in the faces of her people. They were breaking. That night, Sirana received a message she did not expect. It came from the humans. She opened it with numb fingers, expecting nothing. What could the humans possibly say that would make any difference? They were small and far away. They could not save her people. No one could. The message contained only 4 words. Help is en route. Sirana stared at the screen for a long time. She read the words again and again, trying to understand what they meant. Help was coming? From the humans? From a species so far away that their ships would take weeks to arrive? From a species so weak that 40 Draxar warships would destroy them in minutes? She did not know whether to laugh or cry. Torek found her sitting at her console, still staring at the message. Governor? He asked. What is it? The humans say they are coming, she said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Hollow, empty. Torek read the message over her shoulder. His expression shifted from confusion to sadness, to something that might have been the faintest trace of hope. Maybe they know something we do not, he said quietly. Maybe they are fool, Sirana replied, but she did not delete the message. She kept it open on her screen as she worked through the night, trying to find some way to save her people. She looked at those 4 words whenever her despair became too great to bear. Help is en route. She did not believe it. She could not believe it, but she wanted to. She wanted to believe that somewhere in the vast darkness of space, someone was coming. Someone who cared. Someone who would fight for strangers they had never met. She wanted to believe that the galaxy was not as cold and cruel as it seemed. Outside her window, the Draxar fleet waited. The stars burned behind them like distant flames. The final hours of Cathara Prime ticked away in silence, and far across the galaxy, something ancient and terrible was waking up. Something that had been sleeping for a long time. Something that had just received a message from a small blue world asking for help. Something was coming. Something that howled. 30 hours had passed since the Draxar arrived. 30 hours of fear and waiting and watching the sky for death. The people of Cathara Prime were exhausted. They had not slept. They had barely eaten. They simply waited for the end to come. Warlord Thesic sat in his command chair aboard the flagship and watched the planet below with amusement. He had done this many times before. 11 worlds had fallen to his fleet. 11 species had learned to kneel before the hegemony. The Valeth would be the 12th. His second officer, a younger Draxar named Korath, approached the throne. Warlord, the deadline approaches. Shall we begin targeting the capital city? Not yet, Thesic said. Let them suffer a little longer. Fear makes better slaves. Korath nodded. He understood his master well. Thesic did not simply want victory. He wanted despair. He wanted the Valeth to beg for mercy before he destroyed them. He wanted to break their spirits completely so that those who survived would never dream of resistance. Tell me, Thesic continued, have any of their so-called allies responded to their distress calls? Many species have expressed concern, Korath reported. None have sent ships. The Galactic Council has scheduled a meeting for next month. Thesic laughed. It was a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. Of course they have. The galaxy is full of cowards. They will write strongly worded letters while we take everything we want. They will debate and discuss while we forge chains for new slaves. He leaned forward in his chair. This is why the hegemony will rule everything someday. We act, they talk. On the planet below, Governor Serana was trying to hold her people together. She had made a decision in the dark hours of the night. If these were truly the final hours of Cathara Prime, then her people would not spend them hiding in fear. They would spend them living. They would spend them being who they had always been. She broadcast a message to the entire planet. My people, she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. I cannot save you. I have tried everything. I have called for help from every corner of the galaxy. Almost no one answered. Those who did offered only words. She paused and took a deep breath. But I will not ask you to spend your final hours in darkness and terror. The Draxar want us to be afraid. They feed on our fear like parasites. I say we deny them that satisfaction. She looked directly into the camera, her eyes bright with determination. Open the shelters. Let the children play in the streets. Let the musicians play their songs. Let families share meals together. Let us be Valeth until the very end. If we must die, let us die as ourselves, peaceful, kind, and unbroken. The message spread across the planet like a wave. At first, people were confused. Some thought their governor had gone mad. But then slowly, they began to understand. Shelter doors opened. Children emerged, blinking in the sunlight. They did not understand why the adults were crying. They only knew that they were finally allowed to go outside and play. Musicians carried their instruments into the town squares. They played songs of joy and hope, songs that had been passed down through generations. The music floated up into the sky, a quiet defiance against the metal monsters above. Families gathered around tables laden with food. They shared stories and laughter and tears. They told each other how much they loved one another. They held hands and watched the sun set over their beautiful world. Warlord Thesic watched all of this through his surveillance drones. He did not understand it. His people would have spent their final hours fighting or fleeing or begging for mercy. The Valeth were doing none of these things. They were simply living. It confused him, and it annoyed him. Strange creatures, he muttered. They will learn to fear properly once the burning begins. In her office, Serana received another message from the humans. This one was longer than the first. It contained coordinates, an estimated arrival time, and a strange request. Please broadcast the Draxar fleet positions on an open channel, continuously. Do not stop until we arrive. Serana read the message twice. She did not understand why the humans wanted this information. Their ship, if they were even sending a ship, would have its own sensors. Why would they need the Valeth to broadcast enemy positions? But she had no better options. She had no options at all. So she did as the humans asked. Her communication officers began transmitting the Draxar fleet data on every open frequency. They updated it constantly, tracking every movement of every enemy vessel. The information flowed out into space like a river of light, carrying with it a desperate hope that someone was listening. The Draxar detected the transmissions almost immediately. They are broadcasting our positions, Korath reported to Thesic, on every frequency. Let them. the warlord replied with a dismissive wave. Who do they think will receive it? Their imaginary rescuers? He laughed again. Perhaps they hope the Galactic Council will watch recordings of their destruction. Let them have their final moments of delusion. The hours passed. The deadline approached. Thesic ordered his fleet to form attack positions around the capital city. 30 vessels arranged themselves in a perfect sphere, their weapons charged and ready. The remaining 10 ships held back as reserves. On the surface, the music stopped. The children were brought back inside. The shelters closed their doors again. The brief moment of joy was over. Now came the ending. Serana stood at her window and watched the ships move into position. She thought about the human message. 12 hours, they had said. The ship would arrive in 12 hours, but the deadline was only 6 hours away. They would not make it in time, if they were even coming at all. Governor, Torek said quietly, it is time to evacuate to the deep shelters. Serana did not move. You go, she said. Take the staff. Take everyone you can. What about you? I will stay here. Someone should witness the end. Torek wanted to argue, but he knew it was pointless. He gathered the remaining staff and led them toward the underground bunkers. At the door, he turned back one final time. It was an honor to serve you, Governor. Serana smiled sadly. It was an honor to lead you. All of you. Now go! She was alone. The room was quiet except for the hum of electronics and the soft beeping of the communication console. Serana sat down in her chair and watched the enemy fleet on her screen. 30 ships pointed at her city. Millions of lives depending on nothing but the mercy of a creature who had none. 4 hours until the deadline, then 3, then 2. Serana closed her eyes and tried to remember happy times. Her wedding day, the birth of her children, the first time she saw her grandchildren smile. She held these memories close like treasures, protecting them from the darkness that was coming. 1 hour until the deadline. Aboard the Draxar flagship, Korath approached the warlord with a puzzled expression. Sir, our sensors are detecting something unusual at the edge of the system. Thesic opened one eye. He had been resting, conserving his energy for the entertainment to come. What is it? A gravity disturbance. Something is coming through hyperspace. Probably a Valeth cargo ship trying to flee. Or perhaps one of their cowardly allies finally sent an observer to watch from a safe distance. Thesic closed his eye again. Ignore it. Sir, the readings are growing larger. Whatever is coming is accelerating. This made Thesic open both eyes. Ships did not accelerate in hyperspace. They traveled at a fixed speed determined by their drives. The only way to arrive faster was to push the engines beyond their normal limits, a dangerous maneuver that could destroy the ship. How large are the readings? He asked. Korath checked his instruments. His face grew pale. Large, sir. Very large. And it is not slowing down. Thesic rose from his chair and walked to the sensor display. He watched the readings climb higher and higher. Whatever was coming was moving at speeds that should be impossible. It was tearing through hyperspace like a beast running toward its prey. That is not a cargo ship, Thesic said slowly. That is not an observer. What is it, sir? Before Thesic could answer, the gravity readings spiked to maximum. The edge of the system seemed to tear open like a wound. And through that wound came something that made even the warlord take a step backward. It was a ship, but it was not like any ship the Draxar had ever seen. It did not drift into normal space gently, the way most vessels did. It exploded into reality at full combat speed, its engines blazing so bright they hurt to look at. The ship was massive, covered in weapons and scars and armor that looked like it had been forged in the heart of a dying star. And from its communication array came a sound that filled every frequency in the system, a howl. A long, terrible, beautiful howl that echoed across the void like the cry of some ancient predator awakening from a long sleep. Governor Serana heard it in her office. The sound made her stand up straight. It made her heart beat faster. It made her feel something she had not felt in days. Hope. The humans had come. The ship was called the UNSN Adamant Fury. It was a Leviathan-class battleship, one of only 12 in the entire human fleet. It had fought in 7 wars and survived them all. Its hull was covered in scars from battles that would fill history books. Every mark was a story. Every dent was a victory. Captain Elena Vance stood on the bridge and watched the Draxar fleet appear on her sensors. 40 ships, 40 enemies. She had faced worse odds before. "Status report," she said calmly. "Shields at full power," her tactical officer replied. "Weapons charged and ready. All crew at battle stations." "Enemy fleet composition? 30 standard cruisers, 8 heavy destroyers, 2 command vessels, 1 flagship." The officer paused. "They outgun us significantly, Captain." Vance smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "Numbers are not everything, Lieutenant. Sound the war horn again. Let them know we are here." The adamant Fury's horn echoed across space once more. It was an ancient tradition, dating back to when humans sailed wooden ships across their home planet's oceans. Ships would blow their horns to announce their arrival, to challenge their enemies, to say, "Here we are. Come and face us if you dare." The Draxar heard the howl on every frequency. It cut through their communications like a knife. It was loud and defiant and completely insane. Warlord Thessox stared at the human ship on his display screen. He could not quite believe what he was seeing. One ship. The humans had sent one ship against 40. Either they were incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. He decided it was the latter. 10 ship, he ordered. "Destroy that vessel. The rest continue preparations for the bombardment." 10 Draxar cruisers broke formation and moved to intercept the adamant Fury. They spread out in an attack pattern, their weapons locking onto the human ship. From their perspective, this was simple. One ship against 10. The human would be destroyed in minutes. The adamant Fury did not try to avoid them. It did not change course. It accelerated directly toward the Draxar formation, moving faster than any ship that size should be able to move. "They are charging straight at us," reported the lead Draxar captain. "No evasive maneuvers, no tactical formation. They are just running toward us." "Then they are fools," came Thessic's voice over the communication channel. "Destroy them quickly and return to formation." The Draxar ships opened fire. Beams of energy lanced through space toward the human vessel. Missiles streaked across the void, trailing fire. The attack was overwhelming, coordinated, precise. The adamant Fury's shields flared bright as they absorbed the assault. The ship shuddered but did not slow down. Its shields held. "Minimal damage," the Draxar captain reported, confusion clear in his voice. "Their shields are stronger than expected." Before he could say anything else, the adamant Fury fired back. The ship's main weapon was a spinal-mounted kinetic accelerator. It fired a solid tungsten slug at 12% the speed of light. There was no fancy energy beam, no flashy explosion at the barrel. Just a simple projectile moving so fast that nothing in the universe could stop it. The slug hit the lead Draxar cruiser directly in the center. It punched through the front of the ship, through every deck, through every bulkhead, and out the back. The entire vessel simply came apart, torn in half by the force of the impact. Secondary explosions rippled through the debris as fuel and ammunition ignited. The ship was gone in less than a second. The remaining 9 Draxar vessels stopped firing. Their captains stared at their screens in disbelief. They had never seen anything like this. One shot, one hit, one kill. Instant destruction. The adamant Fury kept coming. "Break formation!" the Draxar squadron leader screamed. "All ships, break formation!" The 9 cruisers scattered in different directions. They tried to put distance between themselves and the human ship. They tried to escape. The adamant Fury did not chase all of them. It selected 3 targets and ran them down with impossible speed. Its secondary weapons opened fire. Plasma cannons and missile batteries that tracked their targets with perfect accuracy. Each shot hit exactly where it needed to hit. Engines exploded, hulls cracked, ships died. 3 more Draxar vessels fell in less than 2 minutes. The remaining 6 fled at maximum speed, racing back toward the main fleet. They did not care about orders. They did not care about honor. They only cared about survival. The adamant Fury let them go. It had made its point. Captain Vance opened a communication channel. Her voice was calm and clear as it broadcast across the system. "This is Captain Elena Vance of the UNSS Adamant Fury. I am here in response to the Valith distress call. Draxar vessels, you have one chance to withdraw from this system. Take it." On the planet below, Governor Serana listened to the human captain's words. She stood at her window with tears running down her face. The human ship hung in space like a guardian angel, its weapons still smoking from the battle. 4 Draxar ships were gone. 4 of the monsters who had come to destroy her world were dead. It was not enough. 36 remained. But it was something. It was proof that the galaxy was not completely without hope. Aboard the Draxar flagship, Warlord Thesic was furious. He had lost 4 ships. 4 ships to a single enemy vessel. It was impossible. It was humiliating. It was unacceptable. All ships, he ordered, his voice tight with rage. All ships engage the human vessel. Destroy it. I want that ship burned from existence. Korath hesitated. Warlord, perhaps we should consider— I gave an order, Thesic roared. We do not retreat. We do not negotiate. We do not flee from one ship, no matter what weapons it carries. The hegemony does not show weakness. The fleet began to move. 35 Draxar vessels adjusted their positions, turning away from the helpless planet below and toward the human battleship. They formed a massive attack formation, layer upon layer of warships bristling with weapons. Captain Vance watched them come. Captain, her first officer said quietly, they are committing their entire fleet against us. Good, Vance replied. That means they are not shooting at the planet. We cannot survive a sustained engagement against this many ships. Even our shields have limits. Vance nodded. Then we will not let it be sustained. Helm, set course for the center of their formation. All weapons, prepare for close combat. Her crew exchanged glances. The center of the enemy formation was the most dangerous place in the entire system. They would be surrounded on all sides, taking fire from every direction. It was suicide, but they had trained for this. They had prepared for moments exactly like this. They were human, and humans did not give up. Yes, Captain, the helm officer replied, setting course. The adamant fury accelerated toward the Draxar fleet. The battle that followed would be remembered for centuries. The Draxar ships opened fire with everything they had. Beams and missiles and projectiles filled the space around the human vessel. The adamant fury's shields blazed with constant impacts. Warning alarms filled the bridge. Damage reports came in from every section, but the ship kept moving. It dove into the heart of the enemy formation, passing so close to Draxar vessels that their weapons could not track it fast enough. At point-blank range, the human ship was devastating. Its cannons tore through enemy hulls like paper. Its missiles found targets with mechanical precision. Its kinetic accelerator fired again and again, each shot punching through another Draxar ship. The Draxar tried to coordinate their fire, but the adamant fury moved too fast and too unpredictably. When they concentrated on one position, the ship was already somewhere else. When they spread their fire wide, the ship's shields absorbed the weaker impacts. 6 Draxar ships died in the first minute, 8 more in the second. The remaining vessels began to panic. Captains screamed at each other over communication channels. Some tried to flee, others crashed into each other in the chaos. The disciplined attack formation dissolved into a desperate mob, and still the adamant fury fought on. Captain Vance stood at the center of her bridge, bleeding from a cut on her forehead where a piece of debris had struck her. Her uniform was torn. Her hands were steady. Her voice never wavered as she issued orders. Target the flagship, she commanded. Everything we have. The adamant fury turned toward Thesic's command vessel. The warlord watched it come through his display screen. For the first time in his long career, he felt something he had never felt before. Fear. Full retreat, he ordered, his voice cracking. All ships, full retreat. Get us out of this system. But it was too late. The adamant fury's main cannon fired one last time. The tungsten slug screamed across space and struck the flagship's engines. The entire rear section of the massive vessel exploded. The ship lost power, lost weapons, lost everything. It drifted in space, crippled and helpless. Around it, the remaining Draxar ships fled in every direction. They did not wait for orders. They did not try to rescue their warlord. They simply ran. The battle was over. Captain Vance surveyed the wreckage through her bridge windows. 14 Draxar ships destroyed. 12 more crippled. The rest scattered like frightened animals. Her own ship was damaged but functional. Her crew was battered but alive. They had won. "Helm," she said, "bring us alongside the flagship. Security teams, prepare for boarding." She paused and looked at the planet hanging in space below them. Millions of people who had been about to die. Millions of people who were now safe. "And someone get me a communication channel to Governor Serana. I think we should introduce ourselves properly." In her office on Cathara Prime, Serana watched the human ship move toward the crippled Draxar flagship. She was laughing and crying at the same time. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely press the button to accept the communication request. The humans had come, one ship against 40, and they had won. The boarding operation took less than an hour. Human Marines moved through the crippled Draxar flagship like ghosts. They were fast and silent and utterly professional. The surviving Draxar crew tried to resist at first, but they were demoralized and terrified. Their warlord had promised them an easy conquest. Instead, they had watched their fleet torn apart by a single enemy ship. Most of them surrendered without a fight. Warlord Thesic was found in his command chamber, surrounded by his personal guards. They were the best warriors in his army, veterans of dozens of battles. They raised their weapons as the humans approached. "Stand down," Captain Vance commanded through her helmet speakers. "Your fleet is destroyed. Your ship is crippled. There is no victory here for you. Only survival or death." Thesic laughed bitterly. "And if we surrender? What then? Execution? Torture? That is what I would do to my enemies." "Then it is fortunate that we are not you," Vance replied. "Surrender and you will be treated according to galactic law. You will stand trial for your crimes. You will face justice, not vengeance." The warlord stared at her for a long moment. He did not understand this creature. He had spent his entire life surrounded by predators, by beings who took what they wanted through force and cruelty. The concept of mercy was foreign to him, but he understood survival. "Stand down, Huerny," he ordered his guards. They hesitated, confused, but eventually lowered their weapons. The humans moved forward and placed restraints on all of them. As Thesic was led away, he asked one final question. "Why did you come? The Valeth have nothing. They are nobody. Why risk your ship, your crew, for strangers who cannot help you?" Captain Vance removed her helmet and looked at him with eyes that held no hatred, no anger, only quiet determination. "They asked for help. We could provide it. That is enough." Thesic did not understand. He never would. On Cathara Prime, Governor Serana finally left her office. She walked through the streets of her capital city, surrounded by her people. They were crying and laughing and hugging each other. The shelters were open. The children were playing again. The music had returned. They had survived. Serana made her way to the main spaceport, where a human shuttle was descending from orbit. She watched it land with a mixture of awe and gratitude. The vessel was smaller than she expected, sleek and functional, without any of the decorations that other species favored. The hatch opened and Captain Vance stepped out. She looked tired. There was a bandage on her forehead and her uniform was stained with blood and soot. But she walked with the confidence of someone who had done this before and would do it again. "Governor Serana," she said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I am Captain Elena Vance. I apologize for the delay in our arrival." Serana took the offered hand. Human skin was warm and soft, much like her own. "Delay?" she repeated, almost laughing. "Captain, you arrived in time to save us. That is all that matters." "We pushed our engines beyond safety limits. My chief engineer is not happy with me." Vance smiled slightly, "But she will forgive me when she sees what we accomplished." They walked together through the spaceport, surrounded by crowds of grateful Valeth who cheered and reached out to touch the human captain. Vance accepted their thanks with grace and humility. "Your ship," Serana said as they entered a more private area. "The way it fought, I have never seen anything like it. Your weapons, your shields, your tactics. How is this possible? Your species is so young, so small compared to the great powers of the galaxy." Vance considered the question carefully before answering. "Humanity has a complicated history, Governor. We spent most of our existence fighting each other. Wars over land, over resources, over ideas. We became very good at violence." She paused. "Too good, perhaps. We nearly destroyed ourselves several times. But you did not. No, we learned. We evolved, not biologically, but as a civilization. We realized that the same skills that made us dangerous could also make us protectors. Vance looked out a window at the sky, where her ship still orbited. We chose to use our strength to help rather than conquer. It is not always easy. The temptation to take what we want is still there. But we resist it because we believe in something better. Serana nodded slowly. She was beginning to understand. You could have been like the Draxar. We could have been much worse than the Draxar, Vance admitted. Our history contains horrors that would make them seem gentle by comparison. But we also contain the ability to grow beyond our worst impulses. That is what makes us human, I think. Not our capacity for destruction, but our capacity for change. They sat together in a quiet room while aides brought food and drink. Serana had 1,000 questions, but she asked the one that mattered most first. What will happen to the warlord? He will be transported to a neutral station and turned over to the Galactic Council for trial, Vance explained. His crimes are well documented. He will face justice according to interstellar law. Will he be executed? Vance shook her head. That will depend on the council, but humans generally oppose capital punishment. We believe that even the worst criminals can be contained without killing them. Death is too easy, too final. It teaches nothing. Imprisonment forces the guilty to live with what they have done. Serana found this philosophy strange but not unappealing. Her own people had abandoned execution centuries ago. They preferred rehabilitation when possible, containment when necessary. Perhaps humans were more similar to the Valeth than she had realized. I must ask, Serana said carefully, about the price of your help. We are grateful beyond words, but we have little to offer. Our wealth was destroyed with our cargo stations. Our economy will take years to rebuild. Captain Vance set down her drink and looked directly at the governor. We did not come here for payment. Everyone wants something. That is how the galaxy works. That is how the galaxy has worked, Vance corrected, but it does not have to be that way forever. We came because you needed help and we could provide it. That is the simple truth. Serana waited for the catch. There was always a catch. However, Vance continued, if you insist on some form of exchange, there are things we would appreciate. Here it comes, Serana thought, the real cost. We would like to establish a small trade office in your capital. Nothing elaborate, just a place where our merchants can conduct business. Vance smiled. We have also heard that Valeth music is beautiful. Perhaps we could arrange some cultural exchanges, concerts, art exhibitions, that sort of thing. Serana stared at her. That is all you want? What did you expect? I expected demands, territory, resources, political concessions, something that would hurt us. Vance's expression grew serious. Governor, let me be very clear about something. Humanity did not save your world to exploit you. We did not fight the Draxar so that we could take their place. We believe in a galaxy where species help each other without expecting payment, where strength is used to protect rather than dominate. She leaned forward. We are trying to build something new, a network of cooperation and mutual support. We cannot do it alone. We need partners who share our values. The Valeth, from everything we have seen, would make excellent partners. Serana felt tears forming in her eyes again. She had spent so long believing that the galaxy was cruel and cold, that kindness was weakness and cooperation was foolishness. The Draxar had seemed to prove her right, but now here were the humans, offering friendship instead of chains. Why? She whispered. Why do you care so much about strangers? Captain Vance thought about the question for a long time. When she finally answered, her voice was soft. Because someone has to, because the galaxy will never become a better place unless someone starts acting like it already is. Because we know what it is like to be small and afraid and alone, and we swore that we would never ignore those feelings in others. She smiled sadly. And because we remember what we used to be, we remember the darkness in our own history. Helping others is how we prove to ourselves that we have truly changed. Serana reached out and took the human captain's hands in her own. Thank you, she said simply, for coming, for fighting, for believing in something better. Thank your communications officer, Vance replied. If you had not sent that distress call, we would never have known you needed help. Never be afraid to ask. That is the first step toward building the galaxy we all deserve. Outside the window, the sun was setting over the capital city of Cathara Prime. The light turned everything gold and warm. Children's laughter drifted up from the streets below. Somewhere, someone was playing music. Life continued, thanks to the humans. Thanks to a single ship that had howled through the void to save strangers it had never met. Thanks to a species that had chosen to be better than its nature. 3 weeks had passed since the battle. The adamant fury still orbited Cathara Prime, but it was no longer alone. 2 human supply ships had arrived, carrying engineers and construction materials and food. The work of rebuilding had begun. Human technicians worked alongside Valith workers to repair the orbital cargo stations. They taught new techniques and shared their tools freely. They asked nothing in return except the chance to learn about Valith culture and history. Human doctors set up temporary clinics in the cities that had been damaged during the blockade. They treated injuries and illnesses without asking for payment. They trained local healers in advanced medical procedures that would serve the Valith for generations. Human engineers helped restore power systems and communication networks. They improved existing infrastructure in ways that would make the colony stronger than it had been before the attack. Governor Serrana watched all of this with wonder and growing hope. The humans were not just repairing her world, they were making it better. And they were doing it simply because they could. She met with Captain Vance regularly during those weeks. The human captain was preparing to leave soon. Other distress calls had come in while the adamant fury was stationed at Cathara Prime. Other worlds needed help. Other innocents faced threats they could not handle alone. "Will you ever rest?" Serrana asked during one of their conversations. Vance smiled tiredly. "Eventually, every crew member gets rotation time. We return home, see our families, remember why we fight. Then we go back out." She looked out the window at the stars. "The galaxy is very large, Governor, and there is so much work to do. How many ships like yours do the humans have? 12 Leviathan-class battleships, many more smaller vessels. But even that is not enough. We cannot be everywhere at once. We cannot save everyone who needs saving. Then why do you try?" Vance considered the question. "Because every life we save matters. Every world we protect becomes stronger. Every act of kindness creates ripples that spread outward in ways we cannot predict." She turned to face Serrana. "The Valith will recover from this attack. In time, you may become prosperous again, and perhaps, someday, you will be in a position to help someone else. That is how change happens, one rescue at a time, until the entire galaxy is different." Serrana nodded slowly. She understood now. The humans were not just saving individual worlds. They were trying to transform an entire civilization through example. On the final day before the adamant fury departed, Warlord Thesic was transported to a shuttle that would take him to the Galactic Council for trial. He was bound but uninjured. The humans had kept their word about treating him according to law. Captain Vance visited him one last time before the transfer. Thesic sat in his cell, staring at nothing. He had lost everything. His fleet was destroyed. His reputation was ruined. He would spend the rest of his life in a prison cell, remembered as the warlord who was defeated by a single human ship. "Have you come to mock me?" he asked without looking up. "No," Vance replied. "I came to ask you something." This made Thesic raise his eyes. "What could you possibly want to know from me? Why did you do it? The conquests, the slavery, the destruction? You had ships and soldiers and resources. You could have built an empire through trade and diplomacy. Instead, you chose terror and violence. Why?" Thesic laughed bitterly. "Because it worked. Because the galaxy rewards strength and punishes weakness. Because no one ever stopped me. Someone stopped you now. Yes." The warlord's voice was hollow. "One ship, one human ship. I still do not understand how." He looked at Vance with something that might have been curiosity. "Your species confuses me, Captain. You have the power to conquer. I have seen it. Your weapons could crush any fleet in the galaxy. Yet you use that power to protect strangers. Why?" Vance thought about her answer carefully. Because we know what conquest truly costs, not just in lives, but in souls. Every empire built on cruelty eventually collapses under the weight of its own hatred. Every tyrant is eventually overthrown by the slaves they created. We have seen it happen again and again throughout our history. She moved closer to the cell's barrier. We could be conquerors, Thesok. We have the technology and the will, but we choose not to be. Every day we make that choice again. Every time someone threatens innocent people, we have to decide who we want to be. And who do you want to be? Better than we were. Better than you. Better than anyone expects us to be. Vance smiled sadly. It is the hardest fight we have ever undertaken. Conquering the galaxy would be easy compared to conquering our own nature. But we believe it is worth it. Thesok was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. I do not understand you. I never will. But perhaps that is the point. Vance nodded and turned to leave. At the door, she paused. For what it is worth, Thesok, your life is not over. Prison will give you time to think about the choices you made. Perhaps you will find something worth living for beyond conquest. Perhaps not. That is up to you now. She left him alone with his thoughts. The shuttle departed an hour later, carrying the former warlord toward justice. Serana watched it go from her office window. She felt no satisfaction in his defeat, only a vague sadness that such potential had been wasted on cruelty. The adamant Fury prepared for departure. Its hull had been repaired during the stay at Cathera Prime. Fresh supplies had been loaded. The crew was rested and ready for whatever came next. Governor Serana traveled to the spaceport one final time to say goodbye to Captain Vance. They stood together on the landing platform, surrounded by hundreds of Valeth who had come to thank the humans personally. I do not have words sufficient to express our gratitude, Serana said. You saved my world. You saved my people. We owe you everything. Vance shook her head. You owe us nothing except this. Remember what happened here. Tell your children about it. Pass the story down through generations. Let it become part of who you are. She smiled. And if you ever find yourselves in a position to help someone who cannot help themselves, do it. That is all the payment we need. Serana embraced the human captain, an unusual display of affection for her reserve species. You will always have friends among the Valeth, Captain. Always. The humans boarded their shuttle and returned to the Adamant Fury. The great ship began to move away from the planet, its engines glowing with restrained power. Before it jumped to hyperspace, the war horn sounded one final time. The howl echoed across Cathera Prime, reaching every city and village and farm. It was different this time. Not a challenge or a threat, but a promise. A declaration that help would always come when needed. Then the ship was gone, vanished into the stars, racing toward the next crisis. The next chance to make a difference. Governor Serana remained on the landing platform long after the shuttle had departed. The sun was setting again, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. Her world was still damaged, still recovering, but it was alive. Her people were safe. Around her, the Valeth were already beginning to change. The attack had taught them that the galaxy could be cruel and dangerous. But the human rescue had taught them something more important. That goodness still existed, that strength could be used for protection, that strangers could become saviors. The Galactic Council held emergency sessions to discuss the incident at Cathera Prime. The news spread across civilized space like wildfire. A single human battleship had defeated 40 Draxar warships. The implications were staggering. Other species began to look at humanity differently. The Ordini republics, who had refused to help, sent diplomatic missions to Earth. The Thessian merchant lords, who had offered only prayers, proposed defense treaties. Even the Galactic Council, that slow and cautious body, invited humanity to take a permanent seat at their table. And in the dark corners of the galaxy, predator species received a different message. The Draxar were not the only ones who hunted the weak. There were others who preyed on defenseless worlds, who built empires on suffering and fear. Now they knew. Humanity was watching. Humanity would come when called. Humanity had ships that howled through the void like ancient predators, and crews that fought with skill and fury beyond anything the galaxy had seen. The era of easy conquest was ending. A new age was beginning. Governor Serrana looked up at the stars and smiled. Somewhere out there, the adamant fury was answering another distress call. Somewhere out there, more innocents were being saved. Somewhere out there, humanity was building a better galaxy, one rescue at a time. She returned to her office and began drafting a new policy for Cathera Prime. If the humans could dedicate themselves to helping strangers, then so could the Valeth. They would rebuild their cargo stations larger than before. They would fill them not just with trade goods, but with emergency supplies that could be sent to worlds in need. They would become part of the change that humanity was creating. The howl of the adamant fury still echoed in her memory. It always would. It was the sound of hope. It was the sound of humanity.